Have you ever stepped into a sacred space and felt the air hum with something inexplicable, where light dances in ways it shouldn't, where shadows vanish as if by magic, and the very walls seem to whisper secrets older than time? These aren't just tricks of the eye or products of imagination. They're the carefully crafted illusions of master engineers, visionaries who understood the hidden language of nature long before modern science caught up. These forgotten architects didn't just build structures, they wove spells in stone, bending light, sound, and geometry to create spaces that transcended the ordinary and touched the divine. Picture this, a cathedral where sunlight streams through a single window at dawn, painting a perfect circle of gold on the floor, a circle that shouldn't exist given the angle of the sun. Or a temple where whispers from one corner can be heard crystal clear 50 feet away, as if the very walls were designed to carry secrets. These aren't accidents. They're the work of minds who saw the world differently, who knew how to manipulate the very fabric of perception to inspire awe, devotion, and even fear. But here's the mystery. Why were their techniques lost? How did such brilliance fade into the shadows of history, leaving behind only these tantalizing clues etched in stone? Today, we're stepping into their world, a world where science and spirituality weren't at odds, but partners in creating the impossible. We'll trace the footsteps of these hidden geniuses, uncovering how they harnessed natural forces to build spaces that still baffle experts today. From the precise alignment of ancient temples to the acoustic marvels of underground chambers, their legacy is a testament to human ingenuity at its most profound. This isn't just a story about buildings, it's a story about the boundless creativity of the human spirit and the lengths we've gone to touch something greater than ourselves. So come with me, let's pull back the veil on history's greatest illusions and meet the minds who made them real. Long before the word science even existed, ancient civilizations were already experimenting with the boundaries of human perception. Think about the Great Pyramid of Giza, a structure so precisely aligned with true north that even modern engineers marvel at its accuracy. But this wasn't just about showing off mathematical skill. These builders knew something profound, that by controlling light, shadow, and geometry, they could create moments where the ordinary world seemed to crack open, revealing something transcendent. On the equinox, sunlight slants through the pyramid's passageways in ways that feel almost orchestrated, as if the stones themselves were choreographed to catch the light just so. This wasn't unique to Egypt. Halfway across the world, in India's Brihadiswara temple, a massive granite dome casts no shadow at noon during certain times of the year, a feat that seems to defy physics until you realize the entire structure was calculated to make the impossible look effortless. And in Central America, the Mayans built El Castillo at Chichen Itza so that during the spring and autumn equinoxes, shadows slithered down the pyramid steps like a serpent descending from the heavens. These weren't coincidences. They were deliberate acts of engineering designed to make the divine feel tangible, to convince worshippers that the gods were right there, breathing in the same air. But here's what's even more fascinating. The people who designed these illusions often vanished from history without a trace. Their techniques were so closely guarded that many of their secrets died with them. Some were members of secretive guilds, sworn to protect their knowledge like sacred texts. Others worked under the watchful eyes of priests or rulers who understood the power of these illusions to inspire devotion or fear. After all, if you could make the sun itself obey your architecture, who would dare question your connection to the gods? What's striking is how universal this idea was. From the deserts of Egypt to the jungles of Cambodia, cultures with no possible contact shared eerily similar approaches. It's as if they all stumbled onto the same truth, that humanity craves moments where the veil between the mundane and the miraculous grows thin. And so they built not just temples but experiences. They turned stone into theater, light into revelation, and shadows into proof that the divine was never as far away as it seemed. Light was more than just a tool for these ancient architects. It was the very thread they wove into their sacred tapestries. Take the Pantheon in Rome, where that famous oculus doesn't just let in sunlight. It transforms the entire space into a celestial clock. On significant dates, like the spring equinox, a beam of light pierces through the opening and strikes specific points on the floor or walls, illuminating statues of deities as if they were stepping into the mortal realm. This wasn't just spectacle, it was storytelling in its purest form, a way to make the divine feel immediate and undeniable. But the real magic lies in the details. Some of these engineers didn't just rely on sunlight, they manipulated it. In certain Byzantine churches, hidden mirrors and polished metal surfaces were strategically placed to redirect light, creating the illusion of glowing halos around sacred objects or making candles appear to burn brighter than physically possible. And then there's the play of shadows. In the underground chambers of Malta's hypogeum, carvings were positioned so that flickering torchlight would animate the walls, casting undulating silhouettes that seemed to breathe. These weren't random effects, they were carefully orchestrated to guide emotions, to make worshippers feel they were standing at the threshold of another world. What's even more astonishing is how these techniques crossed continents and eras. In Japan's Ai's Grand Shrine, the alignment of wooden slats and paper screens diffuses light in a way that makes the entire structure appear weightless, as if it could dissolve into the air. Meanwhile, in the medieval cathedrals of Europe, stained glass wasn't just colorful decoration. It was a way to paint with light, transforming biblical stories into radiant visions that shifted with the sun's movement. The message was clear: if light could be harnessed to reveal hidden truths, then perhaps faith could too. These masters understood something profound, that light and shadow aren't just physical phenomena, they're psychological triggers. A sudden beam of light in a dark space doesn't just illuminate, it creates awe. A shadow that moves against logic doesn't just confuse, it unsettles. And in sacred spaces where the goal was often to humble or uplift, these manipulations were the ultimate tools of persuasion. The true genius of these engineers wasn't just in their calculations, but in their ability to make the impossible feel inevitable, as if the gods themselves had dictated the play of light across the stones. Sound was their invisible brushstroke, painting the air with vibrations that could convince a person they were hearing the voice of the divine. In Malta's hypogeum, a subterranean labyrinth carved from solid limestone over 5,000 years ago, certain chambers resonate at exactly 110 Hz, a frequency that modern studies suggest can alter brain activity, inducing states of deep meditation or even mild trance. Step into the oracle room, whisper a word against the wall, and the sound doesn't just travel, it amplifies, reverberating through the stone until it feels less like a human voice and more like something otherworldly answering back. This wasn't an accident. The builders shaped every curve, every niche to manipulate sound waves with precision that would challenge even today's acoustic engineers. But the hypogeum isn't alone in its auditory illusions. Halfway around the world, in the Mayan city of Chichen Itza, the steps of El Castillo pyramid produce an eerie chirping echo when clapped, a sound eerily mimicking the sacred Quetzal bird, a creature revered as a messenger between earth and sky. And in Greece's Epidaurus Theatre, a coin dropped on the stage can be heard clearly from the very back row, 60 meters away, with no modern sound amplification at all. These weren't just clever tricks, they were deliberate designs meant to blur the line between the natural and the supernatural. What's truly remarkable is how these ancient architects achieved such feats without oscilloscopes or frequency calculators. They relied on something far more profound, an intimate understanding of materials and geometry. By tapping stones and listening for tonal differences, they identified resonant frequencies. By shaping walls with parabolic curves, they turned entire chambers into amplifiers. Some scholars believe they even used water-filling vessels to precise levels to test reverberations, adjusting spaces until the very air seemed to hum with intention. The psychological impact was undeniable. Imagine standing in a pitch-black chamber when suddenly a whisper from 20 feet away brushes against your ear as if the speaker were right beside you. Or hearing a chant swell unnaturally, not from a chorus of voices, but from a single person whose sound the architecture multiplied. In an era before artificial lighting, these sonic illusions didn't just accompany rituals, they became the rituals. They made the intangible tangible, turning faith into something you could literally feel vibrating in your bones. Perhaps most intriguing is the universality of these techniques. From the echoing corridors of Egyptian temples to the sonic mirrors of ancient Chinese altars, cultures separated by continents and millennia arrived at the same conclusion. If you could control sound, you could control perception. And in sacred spaces where every sensation was meant to point toward the divine, mastering acoustics wasn't just engineering, it was alchemy, transforming ordinary noise into the voice of the gods themselves. Geometry wasn't just lines and angles to these ancient builders, it was the alphabet of the universe, a hidden script they believed could unlock the secrets of creation itself. Walk into the Parthenon in Athens, and you're standing inside a mathematical masterpiece where every column, every curve, follows the golden ratio with near-perfect precision. This wasn't about aesthetics alone. To the Greeks, this ratio, approximately 1.618, was divine, a proportion found in everything from seashells to galaxies. They crafted their temples to mirror this cosmic order, as if by aligning human-made structures with nature's patterns, they could tap into something transcendent. But the Greeks weren't alone in this obsession. Islamic architects wove geometric perfection into the very fabric of their mosques, covering walls and domes with intricate tessellations that seemed to stretch into infinity. These weren't mere decorations, they were visual prayers designed to lead the eye and the soul toward the infinite. The Alhambra in Spain is a labyrinth of repeating stars and polygons, each shape chosen not just for beauty, but because these patterns symbolized the unending nature of the divine. Step inside and the walls seem to breathe, shifting as you move, creating the illusion that the space itself is alive. Then there's the magic of fractal patterns that repeat at every scale like a never-ending echo. In Cambodia's Angkor Wat, the entire temple complex mirrors the fractal structure of Mount Meru, the sacred mountain at the center of Hindu cosmology. Towers rise in tiers, each level a smaller reflection of the one below, creating a sense of ascending toward the heavens. The effect is uncanny. The longer you look, the more the boundaries between earth and sky seem to dissolve. These builders understood something profound, that certain shapes don't just please the eye, they trick the mind into perceiving depth where there is none, or vastness in a confined space. Perhaps the most startling example lies in Gothic cathedrals, where ribbed vaults and pointed arches weren't just structural innovations, they were psychological ones. By drawing the eye upward along converging lines, these architects created the illusion that the ceiling was floating, untethered from the earth. The message was clear: this was no ordinary building, but a bridge between worlds. Even the stained glass windows played their part, their jewel-toned light arranged in geometric patterns that transformed sunlight into sacred geometry, painting the floors with celestial blueprints. What unites all these traditions is the unshakable belief that numbers and shapes held power, that by encoding their sacred spaces with mathematical truths, they could alter not just how a space looked, but how it felt. A room built to the golden ratio doesn't just feel balanced, it feels right, as if it vibrates at the same frequency as the universe itself. These engineers weren't just constructing walls, they were composing symphonies in stone, using geometry as their musical notation. And though we've lost the names of most of these masterminds, their legacy lingers in every curve, every angle, every space that still centuries later whispers secrets to those who know how to listen. The stones themselves tell a story, one of uncanny precision that defies logic. At Machu Picchu, granite blocks weighing hundreds of tons fit together like pieces of an impossible puzzle, their edges so exact that even after 5 centuries of earthquakes, you still can't slip a piece of paper between them. And it's not just Peru. The foundation stones of the Great Pyramid align with a margin of error thinner than a human hair, their surfaces polished to a mirror finish that still gleams under the desert sun. These weren't just construction choices, they were statements. When every joint is flawless, when every angle is exact, the building stops feeling like a human creation and starts feeling like something handed down from the heavens. But how modern engineers still debate the methods. Some point to the peculiar way certain stones at ancient sites appear almost melted, their edges fused together as if by heat or some forgotten chemical process. Others point to legends like the Incas claim that their stones were softened with a mysterious plant extract, allowing workers to mold them like clay before they hardened again. Then there are the more radical theories, whispers of levitation, of sound frequencies so precise they could vibrate stones into place, or of tools that harnessed natural forces we've yet to rediscover. What's undeniable is the intentionality behind it all. At Japan's Ai's Grand Shrine, wooden joints are cut so precisely that the entire structure can be dismantled and rebuilt every 20 years without a single nail, a tradition maintained for over 1,300 years. In Egypt, the sarcophagus inside the Great Pyramid aligns with celestial events down to fractions of a degree, its interior dimensions matching sacred mathematical ratios. These weren't just technical feats, they were acts of devotion, a way of encoding reverence into the very bones of a building. Perhaps most haunting is the realization that many of these techniques vanished with their creators. The stonemasons of antiquity left no blueprints, no manuals, just these silent, perfect monuments that stand as both tribute and taunt. We can measure their work down to the millimeter, but the true secret, the alchemy that turned rock into poetry, remains just out of reach. And that may be the greatest illusion of all, that the stones themselves seem to whisper, "You know what we are, but you'll never quite know how." Celestial alignments weren't just decorative flourishes. They were the heartbeat of these sacred spaces, pulsing with rhythms older than civilization itself. Take Angkor Wat, where the rising sun on the spring equinox climbs perfectly over the central tower, its light slicing through the temple's corridors like a blade of fire. This wasn't a lucky accident. The entire complex was laid out as a mirror of the constellation Draco, its towers mapping the stars with eerie precision. And it wasn't alone. At Newgrange in Ireland, a 5,000-year-old passage tomb lets the winter solstice sunrise pierce its dark chamber for just 17 minutes each year, flooding the innermost sanctum with golden light. These moments weren't just celestial events, they were conversations between earth and sky, orchestrated by architects who saw time as something to be woven into stone. But why go to such lengths? For these builders, celestial alignments were more than calendars, they were portals. The Maya designed El Caracol at Chichen Itza with narrow windows that framed Venus at its most extreme positions in the sky, marking moments when their feathered serpent god Kukulkan was believed to descend. In Egypt, the temple of Abu Simbel was oriented so that twice a year, sunlight would reach deep into the inner sanctuary to illuminate statues of Ramses Roman II and the gods Amun and Ra, but never touch Ptah, the god of darkness. These weren't just symbolic gestures, they were acts of precision engineering meant to collapse the distance between worshippers and the divine. The deeper mystery lies in how they achieved such accuracy without telescopes or modern mathematics. At Stonehenge, the heel stone aligns with the summer solstice sunrise to within a fraction of a degree, a feat requiring observations spanning generations. Some scholars believe these engineers used simple tools like gnomons or merkits, shadow-casting devices that could track the sun's path with surprising accuracy. Others point to oral traditions where knowledge was passed down through songs or stories encoding celestial patterns. But perhaps the most compelling theory is that they saw the sky differently, not as a distant void, but as a living map, its cycles etched into their cultural DNA. What's haunting is how many of these alignments still work today, centuries after their creators vanished. The Intihuatana stone at Machu Picchu, often called the hitching post of the sun, casts no shadow at noon during the equinoxes, just as it did when the Inca priest used it to predict planting seasons. In Turkey, the 12,000-year-old pillars of Göbekli Tepe align with Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, suggesting even prehistoric cultures had eyes fixed on the heavens. These structures weren't just built to last, they were built to speak, to whisper across millennia that the cosmos and the Earth were never truly separate, but parts of a grand, interconnected design. The true genius of these engineers wasn't just in their calculations, but in their understanding of human awe. They knew that when architecture and cosmos aligned, it did more than mark time, it shattered the ordinary. Imagine standing in a darkened temple as the first sliver of solstice light creeps toward an altar, or watching as a shadow serpent slithers down a pyramid steps exactly on cue. In those moments, the universe didn't feel vast and indifferent. It felt intimate, intentional, alive, and that may be their greatest legacy, not the stones they left behind, but the reminder that wonder is something we can build. The moment you step into a sacred space, your mind begins to change, not by chance but by design. Ancient engineers didn't just manipulate stone and light, they engineered human emotion itself. Take the experience of entering Egypt's Karnak temple, where you're forced to navigate a series of increasingly narrow passageways before emerging suddenly into the staggering expanse of the hypostyle hall. The effect is visceral. Your body tightens in the confined spaces, your breath shortens and then release. The ceiling soars overhead, columns tower like giants, and you're left feeling small, awestruck, primed for reverence. This wasn't an architectural quirk, it was a psychological masterstroke. These builders understood something profound. The body remembers what the mind might forget. In the caves of Cappadocia, winding tunnels twist and turn with no clear path, deliberately disorienting visitors before depositing them into candlelit chambers where the air hums with silence. The effect isn't just spatial, it's emotional. Disorientation strips away certainty, leaving the mind receptive to awe. Meanwhile, in Gothic cathedrals, the floor plan itself tells a story. The narthex, dark and low, symbolizes the earthly realm. As you move toward the altar, the space expands, light floods in, and the ceiling seems to pull your gaze upward, a physical metaphor for spiritual ascent. Every step is a lesson in subliminal storytelling, but perhaps the most cunning trick lies in elevation. In the temples of Bali, staircases are built with uneven steps, some uncomfortably high, others awkwardly shallow. Forcing your body to adjust its rhythm breaks your automatic stride, making you hyper-aware of each movement. By the time you reach the summit, your mind isn't just focused, it's primed for revelation. Similarly, the Mayans built their pyramids with steep, uneven steps, ensuring climbers couldn't ascend without effort. The struggle was the point. Arriving breathless at the top, the world spread out below you. The boundary between mortal and divine felt unnervingly thin. Modern science now confirms what these architects knew intuitively. Studies show that high ceilings encourage abstract thinking, while confined spaces trigger instinctive vigilance. Sudden shifts in scale release dopamine, the brain's wonder molecule. Even the acoustics of these spaces play a role. Reverberant echoes make voices sound unearthly, while utter silence can induce trance-like states. These engineers weren't just building structures, they were crafting emotional journeys, using space as a tool to sculpt consciousness. What's startling is how universal these techniques were. From the zigzagging paths of Japanese Zen gardens designed to slow pace and clear the mind, to the dizzying mirrored halls of Islamic palaces that dissolve the boundary between real and reflected, cultures across time and geography arrived at the same conclusion: to alter belief, first alter perception. Today's architects are just beginning to relearn these principles, experimenting with neuroarchitecture that harnesses how spaces make us feel. But the ancients had already perfected it. Their blueprints weren't just drawn in ink, but in the invisible lines of human psychology. Their greatest illusion wasn't in the stones they laid, but in the minds they shaped. Water wasn't just an element in these sacred spaces. It was a living canvas, a tool so versatile it could bend perception to its will. Walk through the courtyards of India's Taj Mahal, and you'll see the entire mausoleum mirrored perfectly in its central pool, as if the building exists simultaneously in two worlds, one of marble, the other of liquid sky. This wasn't just beauty for beauty's sake. By doubling the structure's image, the architects created a visual paradox. Is the real Taj the one of stone, or the one shimmering in the water? The effect is deliberate, forcing visitors to question where the physical ends and the ethereal begins. But reflections were only the beginning. Beneath Mexico's Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan, archaeologists discovered a hidden network of canals lined with sheets of mica, a mineral that acts like a natural mirror. When filled with water, these channels would have turned the pyramid's foundation into a glowing, liquid prism, making it appear as though the structure rose not from Earth, but from another realm entirely. Even more astonishing are the underground cisterns beneath Malta's temples, where sound tests reveal that water-filled chambers amplify specific frequencies, turning whispers into resonant chants that seem to rise from the ground itself. Imagine standing in such a space, hearing voices emerge from the earth as if the stones themselves were speaking. The symbolic weight of water only deepened its power. In Buddhist tradition, the act of crossing a reflective pool symbolizes the journey from illusion to enlightenment. Japan's golden pavilion, Kinkaku-ji, floats atop a pond designed to ripple with even the slightest breeze, fragmenting its golden facade into countless fleeting reflections, a meditation on impermanence. Meanwhile, in Moorish Spain, the Court of the Lions at the Alhambra Palace uses narrow water channels to create the illusion that the stone lions at its center are weeping, their tears flowing eternally into the basin below. These weren't just decorative tricks, they were narratives written in liquid, designed to evoke visceral emotional responses. Perhaps most ingenious were the hydraulic illusions. In the gardens of Persia, engineers designed fountains that seemed to defy gravity, their arcs timed to the wind so water appeared to flow upward. Roman temples used pressurized systems to make statues weep or drink from sacred springs during rituals, blurring the line between idol and deity. And in Cambodia, the moats surrounding Angkor Wat weren't just defensive. They acted as giant mirrors, catching the first and last light of day to set the temple ablaze twice over, once in stone and once in liquid fire. What unites all these techniques is the understanding that water doesn't just reflect reality, it transforms it. By harnessing its fluidity, its sound, its light, these engineers turned ponds into portals and fountains into sermons. They knew something we often forget, that the most powerful illusions aren't those that deceive the eye, but those that invite the soul to see differently. In their hands, water became more than an element, it became the ultimate sacred trickster, whispering that the boundary between earth and heaven was always meant to ripple. Behind every impossible structure, there were minds, real people who formed secret networks of knowledge so potent, their identities had to be erased from history. These weren't solitary geniuses, they were part of tightly knit guilds, brotherhoods of builders who guarded their techniques like state secrets. Picture a medieval mason's lodge, where apprentices learned not through written manuals, but through coded gestures, symbolic tools, and rituals designed to imprint knowledge directly into muscle memory. The Freemasons are the most famous inheritors of this tradition, but their roots stretch back much further, to the Dionysian architects of ancient Greece, the Collegia Fabrorum of Rome, and even earlier, to the shadowy schools of Egypt where geometry was considered divine language. What's chilling is how thoroughly these guilds vanished. In the ruins of Gothic cathedrals, you'll find marks, tiny symbols chiseled into stones, often hidden from public view. These weren't signatures, they were encrypted instructions, a language of angles and curves that told workers how to fit stones together. But the full cipher. Lost, the master builders who understood it took their knowledge to the grave, leaving behind only fragments. Some scholars believe this was intentional. When Rome fell, the Collegia Fabrorum dissolved, and their secrets scattered like dust. Later, during the Inquisition, entire guilds were purged for fear their architectural magic might challenge ecclesiastical authority. Yet traces of their influence persist. The layout of Chartres Cathedral mirrors the constellation Virgo with precision that shouldn't have been possible in the 12th century. Its labyrinth, a geometric puzzle embedded in the floor, encodes mathematical constants found in nature. Who taught these builders to harmonize architecture with cosmic patterns? The answer might lie in the guild's most sacred rule. Knowledge wasn't written, it was performed. Apprentices spent decades mastering the art of memory, mentally reconstructing complex designs through song, dance, and storytelling. This wasn't just tradition, it was survival. When books burned, oral knowledge endured. The greatest mystery isn't how they built, but why their methods were so fiercely protected. Some theories suggest these guilds held more than architectural secrets. They might have preserved ancient understandings of earth energies, resonant frequencies, or even psychological manipulation. When Napoleon's engineers examined the Great Pyramid, they reported finding hidden chambers that defied conventional physics, their walls lined with materials that absorbed sound. Similar accounts emerge from India's Ajanta caves, where whispers in one chamber can be heard clearly in another, thanks to parabolic surfaces carved with uncanny accuracy. Were these acoustic marvels accidental or proof of a science we've yet to rediscover? Political upheaval played its part in silencing these masters. When Constantinople fell in 1453, Byzantine scholars fled westward with troves of classical knowledge, including texts on sacred geometry. But by then, the original guilds were ghosts. Their legacy survives in odd places. The precise celestial alignments of Washington, D.C.'s street grid, the eerie acoustics of Mormon Tabernacle Choir's hall, even in the vaulted ceilings of modern concert halls designed by architects who have studied ancient harmonics. The guilds may be gone, but their fingerprints linger not just in stone, but in the very way we engineer wonder. Their greatest lesson, that true mastery, isn't just about building things, but about knowing what to leave unsaid. Paintings in sacred spaces didn't just hang on walls, they played games with perception. In the Basilica di San Pietro in Rome, Andrea Pozzo's ceiling fresco stretches the vault into an impossibly high heaven, a masterpiece of trompe l'oeil where painted columns merge seamlessly with real architecture. Stand in one spot and the scene looks perfectly proportioned. Move a few feet and the illusion holds, defying the laws of perspective. This wasn't just artistic skill, it was mathematics in service of mysticism. Pozzo and others like him used anamorphosis, a technique that distorts images so they resolve into clarity only from precise vantage points. To the faithful, it was proof that truth wasn't always immediate. Sometimes you had to stand in the right place to see it. Statues, too, were collaborators in this visual theater. In Spain's Santiago de Compostela, the statue of St. James seems to track worshippers with its eyes, no matter where they kneel. The secret, subtly carved pupils and strategic lighting that cast shadows to create the illusion of movement. Similarly, in Buddhist temples across Asia, golden Buddhas were positioned so that flickering lamp light made their serene expressions appear to shift, smiling one moment, solemn the next. These weren't static idols, they were mirrors of the devotee's own emotional state, reflecting back whatever reverence or doubt they brought into the space. Then there were the hidden images waiting to reveal themselves under specific conditions. In some medieval cathedrals, stained glass windows designed for equinox sunlight would project coded symbols onto the floor, a cross, a lamb only visible for minutes each year. In Ethiopia's rock-hewn churches, candlelight at certain angles exposes faint carvings of angels in the ceiling, as if the very stone had been waiting to confess its secrets. The message was clear: divinity wasn't always visible to the casual observer. You had to return, to wait, to witness. What's fascinating is how these illusions crossed faiths and continents. Islamic mosaics in the Alhambra used tessellation patterns that seemed to vibrate when stared at, inducing a meditative state. Hindu temple carvings in Khajuraho contain layered imagery-erotic scenes visible up close, transform into cosmic diagrams when viewed from a distance. The engineers behind these works shared an unspoken understanding that faith thrives on mystery, and what's withheld can be as powerful as what's shown. Modern science now confirms what these artists knew instinctively. Peripheral vision tricks, like the ones used in following statues, trigger the brain's threat detection systems, creating a visceral sense of being watched. Anamorphic art exploits our brain's hunger for patterns, rewarding patience with revelation. Even the flicker of candlelight on gold activates our mirror neurons, making us feel connected to something alive. These creators weren't just deceiving the eye, they were hacking the mind, using visual paradoxes to make the intangible feel palpably real. The true brilliance of these illusions lies in their interactivity. Unlike passive paintings in a museum, sacred art demanded participation. You had to move, to kneel, to return at dawn or dusk. In doing so, worshippers became part of the illusion themselves, their actions completing the artwork, their faith the final brushstroke. It was a collaboration across centuries, where artist and observer together conjured the divine from pigment, stone, and light. And perhaps that's the greatest trick of all, that the real magic didn't live in the art, but in the act of looking. History rarely loses knowledge by accident, especially not knowledge this powerful. The slow fade of sacred engineering wasn't just a casualty of time, it was a casualty of shifting power. When Christianity swept through Europe, many pagan temples weren't merely abandoned, they were systematically dismantled, their alignment stones toppled, their acoustic chambers filled with rubble. The Byzantine iconoclasm of the 8th century saw entire churches stripped of their mosaics and frescoes, not just for religious reasons, but because those images held optical tricks that could make a saint's eyes follow you across the room, or a painted dome appear to open into heaven. These weren't decorations, they were psychological tools, and the authorities knew it, but the real vanishing act came with the guilds. When Rome collapsed the Collegia Fabrorum, the empire's elite builders dispersed, taking their secrets with them. Some fled to monasteries where they encoded their knowledge in illuminated manuscripts, hiding geometric formulas in the borders of sacred texts. Others went underground, literally. Beneath Chartres Cathedral, there's a labyrinth carved into the floor, a maze that mirrors the path of the stars, but the builders left no instructions. To walk it correctly, you'd need knowledge passed down from master to apprentice, a living chain now broken. Industrialization dealt the final blow. Suddenly, architecture wasn't about awe, it was about efficiency. Factories didn't need celestial alignments, they needed square footage. The very idea of designing a space to alter consciousness seemed like superstition in an age of steam engines and electric lights. And yet whispers remained. Stonemasons in rural France still talk about the Pierre Quichant, the singing stone, a block that rings like a bell when struck, supposedly used in ancient temples to amplify prayers. In India, traditional temple architects called Esthapatis still follow the Vastu Shastra, texts that describe how certain room proportions can harmonize with natural energy flows. These aren't just traditions, they're fragments of a science we barely remember. The most haunting question isn't how this knowledge disappeared, but why so little effort was made to preserve it. Maybe the answer lies in who held the secrets. These builders weren't just craftsmen, they were intermediaries between the human and the divine. In an age when kings and popes demanded unquestioned authority, that kind of power was dangerous. Better to let the techniques fade than risk them falling into the wrong hands. Today, we're left with ruins that defy explanation. Doorways in Machu Picchu cut with laser-like precision. Mayan ball courts where a whisper at one end can be heard clearly at the other. These aren't just mysteries, they're breadcrumbs left by minds who understood that the greatest magic isn't in making the impossible real, but in making us believe it always was. Centuries after their creators vanished, ancient sacred spaces are finally giving up their secrets not to mystics, but to scientists armed with lasers and algorithms. In 2018, researchers scanning Peru's Chavín de Huanta temple complex made a startling discovery: hidden ducts and vents forming a precise acoustic lattice. When reconstructed digitally, the space amplified low-frequency sounds like chanting while dampening higher frequencies, creating an otherworldly auditory effect. Suddenly, legends of priests speaking with the voice of the gods took on new meaning. This wasn't magic, it was neuroscience encoded in stone, designed to trigger altered states through sound alone. Similar revelations are emerging worldwide. At Turkey's Hagia Sophia, laser scans exposed parabolic curves in the dome's interior curves that focus whispers from one side of the building to the other with eerie clarity. Meanwhile, in Cambodia, ground-penetrating radar revealed that Angkor Wat's moats weren't just decorative. Their precise dimensions created microclimates, cooling the temple complex naturally while reflecting moonlight to illuminate certain carvings only on specific nights. These weren't happy accidents. They were proof of an integrated design philosophy where architecture, ecology, and human psychology intertwined seamlessly. Perhaps most astonishing are the modern tools resurrecting lost techniques. Researchers at the University of Cambridge recently used 3D modeling to decode the impossible acoustics of Greece's Epidaurus Theatre. The secret lay in the limestone seats, their porous texture filtering wind noise while amplifying performers' voices, a feature modern stadium designers are now replicating. Elsewhere, architects studying the passive ventilation of Iran's wind catchers' ancient towers that cooled buildings without electricity are adapting their fractal-like internal structures for zero-energy skyscrapers. The past isn't just being studied, it's becoming a blueprint for the future. Yet the most provocative discoveries challenge our very timeline of human knowledge. When acoustic engineers mapped Scotland's 5,000-year-old Micho tomb, they found its chambers resonated at frequencies known to reduce stress hormones, a design feature predating modern sound therapy by millennia. Similarly, analysis of Mayan water reservoirs revealed advanced filtration systems using zeolite crystals, a mineral NASA now employs for water purification in space. These findings suggest a startling possibility that ancient sacred engineering wasn't just spiritually sophisticated, but scientifically precise in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. The implications ripple far beyond archaeology. In Barcelona, the Sagrada Familia's architects are incorporating Gothic cathedral harmonics to enhance choral performances without microphones. Japanese engineers are embedding Shinto shrine principles into earthquake-resistant buildings, mimicking the flexible joints of wooden pagodas that have swayed through centuries of tremors. Even urban planners are taking notes. The celestial alignments of ancient cities like Teotihuacan, designed to maximize solar gain in winter and shade in summer, offer models for climate-resilient cities. What's emerging is more than historical curiosity. It's a paradigm shift. For generations, we dismissed these feats as primitive or superstitious. Now, we're realizing they represent a different kind of intelligence, one that didn't separate the measurable from the mystical. The stones were speaking all along. We just needed the right tools to listen. And as we decode their language, we might discover that the most sustainable, awe-inspiring architecture of the future could be written in the grammar of the sacred past. The Hagia Sophia's dome doesn't just defy gravity, it defies belief. Gaze upward, and the massive stone canopy seems to hover without support, as if held aloft by divine hands. The secret lies in a stroke of architectural genius, 40 windows puncturing the dome's base, flooding the interior with light that bleaches away the seams between brick and mortar. Sunlight doesn't just illuminate this space, it dissolves the boundaries of the dome itself, turning solid stone into an apparition. But the real magic is in the arches, 4 curved pendentives transferring the dome's weight to hidden piers, a system so advanced that when the structure survived its first earthquake, contemporaries called it a miracle. This wasn't just technical prowess, it was theology written in geometry. To Byzantine worshippers, the dome's illusion of weightlessness mirrored the heavens, a physical manifestation of God's unburdened majesty. Even the materials carried symbolic weight. Bricks made from volcanic ash, lighter and stronger than ordinary clay, while mortar mixed with crushed pottery shards flexed with tremors like living tissue. Every element conspired to create a paradox, a structure both monumental and ethereal. The enigma deepens when you consider the tools available in 637, when the Hagia Sophia rose over Constantinople. Without steel or concrete, how did architects Anthemius of Tralles and Isidorus of Miletus calculate the precise curvature needed to distribute thousands of tons of force? Some scholars point to their study of ancient texts, Archimedes' lost works on stability, or Roman engineering manuals. Others suggest they relied on scale models, testing miniature domes in sand to observe collapse patterns. But the most tantalizing theory involves water. Byzantine engineers were masters of hydraulics, and recent scans reveal cavities beneath the Hagia Sophia's floor, perhaps reservoirs used to test buoyancy principles, turning liquid into a teacher of balance. What's haunting is how much we've forgotten. When the Ottomans converted the Hagia Sophia into a mosque, they added buttresses to stabilize the dome, unaware the original design relied on calculated flexibility. Modern engineers, armed with seismic sensors, now watch as the structure sways slightly in winds, a feature, not a flaw. The dome was designed to dance with the earth, not resist it. This revelation upends centuries of architectural dogma. That rigidity equals strength. The Byzantines knew better. They built not just for stability, but for symbiosis, crafting a dialogue between stone and sky. The dome's final secret lies in its imperfections. Laser scans show subtle asymmetries, a dome not quite circular, arches slightly off-center. For years, these were chalked up to medieval clumsiness. Now we understand they're deliberate, like a master musician tuning an instrument slightly sharp to create tension. The architects introduced controlled imbalances to distribute stress dynamically. The result, a structure that survived fires, quakes, and wars for over 1,400 years, still whispering its lessons to anyone who listens. The Hagia Sophia doesn't just challenge our understanding of physics, it challenges our arrogance. However advanced we think we are, some truths are still written in the language of stone and light. Rising from the jungles of Java like a stone lotus, Borobudur hides its greatest secret in plain sight, but only if you know how to look. From the ground, it's a breathtaking cascade of terraces and stupas, a mountain of carved volcanic rock, but from above, the entire structure transforms into a perfect mandala, a three-dimensional cosmic diagram mapping the Buddhist path to enlightenment. The precision is staggering, 9 stacked platforms forming concentric squares and circles, aligned to the cardinal directions with near-perfect accuracy. Pilgrims climbing its steps aren't just ascending a monument, they're walking a sacred labyrinth, their physical journey mirroring the soul's progression toward nirvana. What's truly baffling isn't just the design, it's how the builders conceived it. Constructed in the 9th century, Borobudur's full geometric pattern is only visible from altitudes impossible for humans to achieve at the time. No vantage points exist on nearby ridges, no surviving diagrams hint at aerial plans. So how did they engineer something meant to be seen from a perspective they could never physically occupy? Some scholars point to meditation. Buddhist monks describe achieving sky consciousness through deep trance, a state where the mind's eye might visualize landscapes from above. Others suggest simpler tools, ropes and stakes laid across the site, painstakingly adjusted until the geometry resonated with sacred ratios. But the mystery deepens when you examine the details. Each of Borobudur's 2,600 relief panels is placed with intentionality, telling stories that unfold as pilgrims spiral upward. The lower levels depict earthly temptations, scenes of desire and suffering carved in vivid detail. Higher up, the carvings grow more abstract, culminating in empty, bell-shaped stupas at the summit, symbols of form dissolving into emptiness. Even the staircases played tricks on perception. Their steep angles force visitors to bow slightly, a physical act of humility woven into the architecture itself. This wasn't just a temple, it was a machine for enlightenment, every stone calibrated to guide both body and mind. The most haunting question isn't how they built it, but why they buried it. For centuries, Borobudur lay hidden under layers of volcanic ash and jungle growth, as if its creators deliberately concealed their masterpiece. Perhaps they understood that some knowledge is too potent to leave unprotected, that a structure designed to alter consciousness might be dangerous in the wrong hands. Or maybe they accepted that all sacred things have seasons and Borobudur's time would come again. When rediscovered in 1814, its geometric perfection stunned explorers. Today, as drones map its hidden patterns, we're left to wonder, did the builders ever imagine their work would one day be seen from the heavens, or was that always part of the plan? Modern architects still grapple with Borobudur's lessons. Its passive ventilation system, hidden channels that keep the interior cool despite Java's humidity, inspires green building designs. Its earthquake-resistant foundation, a mesh of interlocking stones that flex rather than fracture, informs modern seismic engineering. But the real legacy lies in its understanding of space as a spiritual medium. In an age of virtual reality, we're just rediscovering what Borobudur's engineers knew. That architecture isn't just about shelter, it's about shaping the way we move, think, and ultimately see. The temple whispers a challenge across 12 centuries. Enlightenment isn't found by looking outward, but by realizing the view was inside you all along. Deep in the Andes, where mist curls between stone corridors, Chavin de Huanta's walls don't just echo, they answer. The moment a priest blew into his pututu, a conch shell trumpet carved with serpent motifs, the sound didn't simply travel, it transformed. Through a hidden network of ducts and chambers, the note twisted into something primal, a jaguar's roar vibrating through the temple's granite bones. To the worshippers below, it wasn't a man making noise, it was the jungle itself speaking through the walls, a god announcing its presence. This wasn't acoustics. This was alchemy. The genius lies in the details. Archaeologists mapping the complex discovered that certain passageways act like natural organ pipes, their lengths and diameters tuned to amplify specific frequencies. The walls themselves are part of the instrument blocks of black limestone, chosen not just for their durability, but for their unique ability to resonate at frequencies that mimic animal growls. Even the temple's famous Lanzon monolith, a towering granite dagger at the heart of the labyrinth, plays its part. Positioned precisely where sound waves converge, it becomes a living throat, humming with vibrations that make the carvings on its surface seem to writhe in torchlight. But the real revelation came when researchers recreated the priest's rituals. Blowing the pututu in the main plaza produced an ordinary trumpet sound. But when played inside the gallery known as the Gallery of the Offerings, the note mutated first into a rumble, then a shriek, then a chorus of overlapping echoes that seemed to come from every direction at once. The effect wasn't just auditory, it was physiological. At frequencies between 90 and 120 Hz, the human voice box resonates uncontrollably, a phenomenon known as vocal entrainment. Anyone chanting in these spaces would find their own voice deepening, warping, as if possessed. Imagine the terror or the transcendence of hearing your own prayers answered by something inside the stones. What's chilling is how deliberate this all was. The ducts aren't random, they're aligned with celestial events. During solstices, sunlight strikes specific vents, heating the air inside to alter sound propagation. Meanwhile, underground channels funnel water to create a constant, subliminal hum, a sound modern neurologists recognize as a theta wave inducer, the same frequency the brain produces during deep meditation or hypnotic states. This wasn't just theater, it was a psychological operation centuries ahead of its time, using architecture to hack the human nervous system. The lingering question isn't how they built it, but why we've stopped listening. Modern concert halls strive for acoustic purity, deadening echoes to deliver crisp, undistorted sound. But the builders of Chavin embraced distortion, weaponizing it to blur the line between mortal and divine. Perhaps they understood something we've forgotten, that true power doesn't lie in clarity, but in the spaces between, in the whispers that aren't quite human, the growls that might be stone or spirit, the echoes that refuse to reveal their source. In these shadowy frequencies, faith isn't just heard, it's felt in the marrow, a vibration older than language itself. The numbers don't lie, but they do whisper secrets that rewrite history. Take the Great Pyramid's base, a near-perfect square with sides averaging just 2.5 centimeters of variation across 230 meters. That's an error margin of 0.016%, a precision rivaling modern laser leveling. Even more startling, the ratio of its perimeter to height equals 2 pi, a mathematical constant that shouldn't appear in construction millennia before pi was formally calculated. This isn't coincidence, it's evidence of a geometric language so advanced, it forces us to question who taught these builders. Then there's the Pythagorean theorem, embedded in India's Vedic fire altars 2,000 years before Pythagoras was born. These brick structures, some shaped like falcons, others like tortoises, required exact right angles to function ceremonially. The solution: ropes knotted at intervals of 3, 4, and 5 units, forming perfect triangles to align the altars. Similar rope techniques appear in ancient Egypt for surveying fields after Nile floods. Two civilizations, separated by continents and centuries, arriving at identical solutions without any known contact. The implications are staggering. Either math was discovered independently multiple times, or there existed threads of shared knowledge now lost to time. But the real mathematical sorcery lies in curves. The Maya built corbel arches that distribute weight along parabolic trajectories, a principle requiring calculus-level understanding of load vectors. Meanwhile, Rome's Pantheon dome uses a gradient of concrete densities, thinning as it rises to prevent collapse, a technique modern engineers only quantified with differential equations. How did pre-calculus cultures engineer like this? Some scholars point to water. Observing how liquid forms natural catenary curves may have inspired Gothic architects to shape their vaults similarly. Others suggest trial and error over generations, with master builders passing down empirical rules through oral traditions. The most provocative clues come from numerology. In Cambodia's Angkor Wat, the total number of towers mirrors the Hindu cosmic cycle's one central spire surrounded by 108 smaller ones, a sacred number representing the distance between Earth and Sun in sun diameters. China's Forbidden City has exactly 9,999 rooms, one shy of the celestial 10,000, symbolizing the emperor's humility before heaven. These aren't arbitrary choices, they're mathematical poetry, encoding cosmology into architecture with a precision that feels almost supernatural. What unsettles modern researchers isn't just the accuracy, it's the consistency. From the Fibonacci sequence hidden in Hindu temple flowers to the golden ratio structuring Mayan ball courts, these patterns emerge globally like fragments of a universal blueprint. Were these discoveries spontaneous or remnants of some ancestral stem network erased by time? Perhaps the answer lies not in textbooks, but in the stones themselves, silent teachers reminding us that genius isn't bound by timelines, and that the line between miracle and math might be thinner than we think. The stones they chose weren't just strong, they sang. Across the ancient world, builders selected materials with properties that bordered on the supernatural, crafting sacred spaces where the very walls seemed alive. In Egypt's Temple of Hathor at Dendera, the columns contain traces of quartz-rich granite, a mineral known to generate tiny electrical charges when compressed, a phenomenon called piezoelectricity. When thousands of worshippers moved through the halls during rituals, their footsteps might have created enough pressure to make the stones hum with faint light, turning the temple into a flickering beacon of what would have seemed like divine radiance. This wasn't just symbolism, it was spirituality engineered into the fabric of the building itself. Gold played a similar role, though not just for its luster. From the gilded ceilings of Byzantine churches to the gold-plated pinnacles of Hindu temples, this metal was prized for more than its beauty. It's one of nature's most efficient conductors of energy. In Thailand's Wat Phra Kieu, the emerald Buddha, actually carved from jade, sits atop a golden altar designed to align with magnetic ley lines. Visitors often describe a tingling sensation when standing near it, a phenomenon some researchers attribute to the gold's ability to amplify subtle electromagnetic fields naturally present in the Earth. Whether by accident or design, these architects were harnessing materials as conduits between the physical and the unseen. Then there's the mystery of resonant stones. In Ireland's Newgrange, the entrance slab is made of quartz-studded rock that vibrates at specific sonic frequencies. Chant or strike it correctly, and the entire facade hums in response, a phenomenon still studied by acoustic archaeologists. Meanwhile, in Japan's Shinto shrines, the wooden pillars of the inner sanctum are often crafted from hinoki cypress, a tree whose oils release calming terpenes when warmed by candlelight, effectively turning the architecture into a diffuser for sacred scents. These choices weren't decorative, they were deliberate manipulations of environment and perception. What's most striking is how universal this knowledge seems to have been. The Maya built their sweat baths with steam vents lined with stibnite crystals, a mineral that conducts heat unusually well. Viking seer stones, found near ceremonial sites, contain high levels of magnetite, which can create mild hallucinations when exposed to certain magnetic fields. Even the brass bowls in Tibetan monasteries, when struck, produce harmonics that match the brain's alpha wave frequencies, the same rhythms associated with deep meditation. It's as if cultures separated by continents and millennia all grasped a fundamental truth, that matter and spirit weren't opposites, but partners in a grander design. Modern science is just catching up. Laboratories now confirm what intuition guided these builders, that certain rocks emit measurable energy when stressed, that metals can act as antennas for electromagnetic waves, that sound frequencies can alter consciousness. The real question isn't whether these effects are real, but why we ever stopped seeing the world this way. These ancient engineers didn't distinguish between sacred and scientific. To them, a stone that glowed under pressure wasn't just a mineral, it was a messenger, a bridge between the tangible and the transcendent. Their legacy whispers a challenge. What if technology isn't something we invent, but something we remember? Astronomy didn't just influence sacred spaces, it breathed life into them, turning stone into celestial clocks that ticked with the rhythms of the cosmos. At Karnak, the winter solstice sunrise doesn't merely touch the temple. It pierces through the hypostyle hall like a laser, striking the innermost sanctuary with surgical precision. But this wasn't just dramatic staging, it was agricultural necessity. When the Nile's floodwaters receded, that single beam of light signaled the time to plant crops, transforming astronomy into survival. The architects who designed this were more than builders, they were timekeepers, their blueprints written in the language of the stars. Consider the sophistication required to achieve such precision. At Choco Canyon in New Mexico, the Anasazi carved spiral petroglyphs onto cliff faces. On the summer solstice, a dagger of sunlight slices through a rock formation to bisect the spiral perfectly, a feat requiring observation spanning generations. Even more astonishing is Cambodia's Angkor Wat, where the central tower aligns not just with equinox sunrises, but with the draconic cycle of the moon, predicting eclipses centuries in advance. These weren't random acts of reverence, they were acts of mathematical defiance, a way of taming the chaos of the cosmos into something predictable and sacred. The duality of these spaces is what fascinates most. By day, they functioned as solar observatories. By night, they became stellar maps. In Egypt's Temple of Hathor, the ceiling depicts the zodiac in precise detail, mirroring the night sky as it appeared in 50 BC. The Maya took this further. Their Caracol Observatory at Chichen Itza features narrow windows framing Venus at its most extreme positions, allowing priests to calculate its 8-year cycle with astonishing accuracy. These weren't just temples with astronomical features, they were machines for measuring time, their walls etched with the equations of the universe. What's often overlooked is the psychological power of these alignments. When sunlight floods a darkened chamber only on the solstice, it doesn't just mark a date, it creates a moment of collective awe, a shared experience where the divine feels palpably present. The builders understood this intimately. At Ireland's Newgrange, the winter solstice light show lasts just 17 minutes. Miss it, and you wait a full year. This scarcity wasn't logistical limitation. It was theatrical genius, turning celestial mechanics into sacred theater. The true legacy of these astronomer engineers lies in their refusal to separate science from spirit. To them, a solstice alignment wasn't just a solar event. It was a conversation with the gods, a way of weaving human lives into the fabric of the cosmos. Modern observatories may have sharper lenses, but they lack the poetry of these ancient hybrids, where every pillar was a sundial, every corridor a calendar, and every sunrise an answered prayer. The human body wasn't just the architect's tool, it was their blueprint. Long before the golden ratio became a design buzzword, ancient builders were crafting sacred spaces using measurements pulled straight from biology. Take the Egyptian royal cubit, a unit equal to the length of a pharaoh's forearm plus the width of his palm. But this wasn't just practical, it was profound. By scaling entire temples to human proportions, doorways matching arm spans, columns mirroring spinal curves, these engineers created spaces that felt instinctively right, as if the buildings themselves breathed in rhythm with those who entered. Modern researchers are uncovering why these proportions feel so uncannily harmonious. Studies in neuroarchitecture reveal that rooms built to certain ratios, like the Fibonacci sequence found in Hindu temple mandalas, trigger alpha brainwave activity, the same rhythms present during meditation or deep focus. Walk into Cambodia's Angkor Wat, where galleries follow precise 1:1.618 ratios, and something strange happens. The space doesn't just look balanced, it settles the mind, slowing heart rates and easing tension without a single word being spoken. This isn't mysticism, it's physiology. Our brains are wired to find comfort in patterns that echo our own bodies, a truth these builders grasped intuitively. The magic lies in repetition. It's one thing to use sacred proportions in a single archway, but when every element from floor tiles to ceiling heights follows the same organic mathematics, the effect multiplies. Gothic cathedrals employed this principle ruthlessly. Their ribbed vaults aren't just structural, they repeat the branching patterns of trees, while stained glass rose windows mimic the radial symmetry of flowers. Step inside Chartres Cathedral, and you're standing inside a fractal forest of stone, where every dimension whispers the same numeric secret, the result. A space that doesn't just house spirituality but generates it, using geometry as a silent sermon. What's startling is how universal this language was. In Japan, the tatami mat, based on the length of a reclining man, became the module for everything from tea houses to palaces. The Parthenon's columns swell slightly at the center, correcting for the eye's tendency to perceive straight lines as concave, a trick later echoed in Inca trapezoidal doorways. Even the Mayans designed their ball courts to acoustic proportions that made the slap of rubber balls resonate like thunder, turning games into sacred sonic events. These weren't isolated innovations, they were threads in a global tapestry of body-based design, woven long before the word ergonomic existed, the real genius of these systems. They required no manuals. A master builder could teach an apprentice to measure using his own hands and feet, passing down ratios through living practice rather than abstract numbers. When Notre Dame's original architects laid out the nave, they likely used knotted ropes and their own shadows to calculate angles, embedding human scale into every joint. That's why, even in ruins, these spaces retain their power. A broken column still hums with the ghost of the arm that measured it. A doorway still whispers the stride of the foot that paced it. The stones remember what we've forgotten, that the most sacred geometry isn't found in stars or equations, but in the bend of an elbow, the reach of fingers, the quiet mathematics of being alive. Labyrinths weren't merely decorative floor patterns, they were spiritual technologies disguised as walkways. At Chartres Cathedral, the 11-circuit labyrinth embedded in the nave isn't just a maze, it's a pilgrimage in miniature. Pilgrims who couldn't journey to Jerusalem would walk its 264 meters on their knees, tracing a path that mirrored the soul's winding journey toward enlightenment. But the real marvel lies in the mathematics. The turns correspond to musical intervals, every right angle a note in a silent scale, every straightaway a measured rest. Walk it with intention, and your footsteps become a meditation, your rhythm an unconscious prayer. This fusion of movement and meaning wasn't unique to Europe. In Crete's ancient Minoan palaces, clay tablets describe labyrinth rituals where dancers followed spiral patterns to induce trance states. Modern researchers recreating these dances discovered something startling. The repetitive turns synchronize breathing and heart rate, slowing brain waves to theta frequencies, the same state achieved by seasoned meditators. Even more fascinating are the Hopi medicine wheels in North America, where concentric stone paths mirror the labyrinth structure. Tribal elders speak of walking in wisdom, a practice where the physical act of tracing the path unlocks mental clarity, as if the body's motion stirs the mind's hidden depths. Then there's the mystery of resonance. At Italy's Lucca Cathedral, the labyrinth stone tiles are underlain with hollow chambers. When sung or chanted into, the space amplifies specific harmonics, turning human voice into architecture. Similar acoustic tricks appear in Rajasthan's Ranakpur temple, where marble labyrinth channel whispers into distant corridors. These engineers didn't just build pathways, they composed symphonies for the soles of feet and the echoes of breath, crafting spaces where every step was both journey and hymn. What unites these designs is their refusal to separate body from spirit. Unlike mazes designed to confuse with dead ends and false turns, sacred labyrinths have a single, unbroken path. The challenge isn't navigation, but surrender. Walk one and you'll notice something peculiar. The tighter the turns, the more your focus narrows to the present moment. Anxiety about the past or future dissolves. All that exists is the next step. This wasn't accidental. The builders knew that by controlling movement, they could guide consciousness, using geometry as a gentle puppeteer for the mind. Today, we're rediscovering their wisdom. Hospitals from Sweden to California now install labyrinths for stress relief, observing how walking them lowers cortisol levels. Neuroscientists map the brain activity of labyrinth walkers, finding heightened activity in regions linked to insight and creativity. Yet perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in their imperfection. No two hand-carved labyrinths are identical. Their variations testify to human hands wrestling with divine proportions. In those slight asymmetries, we find the truth. The path wasn't meant to be flawless, but felt. Not a puzzle to solve, but a mirror to walk through. The alchemy of color and light turned medieval cathedrals into kaleidoscopes of the divine, where sunlight didn't just enter, it transformed. Walk into Chartres Cathedral at midday, and the sapphire blues of the Virgin Mary's robes don't just glow, they seem to pull you into deep water, slowing your breath and thoughts. Shift your gaze to the ruby red martyr windows, and the effect reverses. Your pulse quickens, the air feels charged, as if the very light carries the heat of sacred fire. This wasn't accidental. Glassmakers added cobalt for blues, gold for crimson, and manganese for purples, not just for beauty, but because they understood how color alters consciousness. Modern studies confirm what these artisans knew instinctively. Blue light lowers blood pressure, while red stimulates adrenaline. The stained glass wasn't decoration, it was environmental psychology written in pigment and light. But the true genius lay in movement. At Canterbury Cathedral, the miracle windows were designed so that as the sun arced across the sky, their jewel-toned projections would creep across the stone floor like celestial clock hands. Pilgrims stepping into the path of these shifting colors weren't just bystanders, they became part of the story. Their bodies momentarily gilded in emerald or violet as biblical scenes played out around them. Some windows even hid secret geometries. The rose window at Notre Dame de Paris, when hit by the solstice sun, projects a perfect 12-pointed star onto the nave floor, a pattern invisible until light unlocks it. These weren't static images, they were interactive theater with the sun as director and the faithful as willing participants. The recipes for this magic were closely guarded. Master glaziers added crushed gemstones, sapphire for blue, garnet for red to the molten glass, creating hues so vibrant they seemed to emit their own light. In some workshops, alchemical symbols were etched onto the glass before firing, a ritual meant to bind spiritual energy into the material itself. The result? Windows that didn't merely depict saints, they seemed to channel them. When sunlight struck the golden halos of Christ figures at the perfect angle, the glow appeared to detach from the glass and hover in midair, a phenomenon still unexplained by modern optics. What's often overlooked is the sound. Stained glass doesn't just play with light, it sings with it. Tap a pane of medieval blue glass, and it rings at a higher pitch than red or green, a discovery confirmed by physicists studying the vibrational frequencies of metallic oxides in the glass. Some scholars believe entire windows were tuned like harps, their harmonies resonating with the cathedral's chant tones. Imagine standing beneath such a window as monks sang, the notes vibrating through colored glass, the air itself seeming to shimmer with sound and hue until the boundary between physical and spiritual dissolved. The legacy of these light workers endures in surprising ways. NASA engineers studying stained glass's light-filtering properties have adapted similar coatings for spacecraft windows to regulate astronaut circadian rhythms. Modern concert halls use colored glass panels to enhance acoustics, rediscovering what cathedral builders knew, that color shapes not just what we see, but how we hear. Yet perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in the imperfections. Hand-blown medieval glass is uneven, its ripples and bubbles scattering light unpredictably. In those flaws, we find the human hand not striving for machine precision, but for something alive, something that breathes with the light it transforms. The greatest trick of these alchemists wasn't in controlling light, but in knowing when to let it dance free. The Taj Mahal's minarets lean ever so slightly outward, a detail so subtle most visitors never notice, yet so precise it saved the structure from earthquakes for nearly 4 centuries. But this isn't just clever engineering, it's a whisper of something far more profound. Across the ancient world, sacred spaces seem to breathe with their environments, as if the stones themselves were alive. In Cambodia's Angkor Wat, the massive moats act as natural thermal regulators, cooling the temple complex by absorbing sunlight during the day and releasing it at night. Meanwhile, deep within Egypt's temple of Edfu, hidden air shafts funnel desert breezes through the inner sanctums, creating a natural ventilation system that keeps temperatures 20 degrees cooler than the scorching sands outside. These weren't just buildings, they were ecosystems in stone designed to dance with the elements rather than defy them. The secret might lie in something modern architects are only now rediscovering: biomimicry. The Jain temples of Rajasthan, carved from living rock, feature lotus-shaped domes that channel rainwater into intricate filtration systems, a design mirrored almost exactly in the underground cisterns of Turkey's Basilica Cistern, where Medusa head columns purify water through layered limestone. Even more striking is the way these structures age. While modern concrete crumbles within decades, the lime mortar used in India's Brihadiswara temple grows stronger over time, its chemical reaction with air forming a self-healing crystalline structure. It's as if these builders didn't just construct sacred spaces, they cultivated them, letting the materials evolve like living organisms. Water, especially, reveals their genius. In the heart of Jordan's Petra, the Nabateans carved channels so precise they could transport water for miles without a single pump, using gravity and capillary action alone. The system was so advanced it included sedimentation tanks to filter debris, a technology Europe wouldn't rediscover until the 19th century. Similarly, the stepwells of Gujarat aren't just reservoirs, they're subterranean cooling chambers where evaporating water drops the temperature by nearly 15 degrees, turning blistering summers into bearable retreats. These weren't feats of brute force engineering, but of deep observation, an understanding that nature already held the solutions if only one knew how to listen. What's haunting is how much we've forgotten. Modern air conditioning gulps electricity, while the wind catchers of Iran's Yazd province towering chimney-like structures cool entire buildings without a watt of power. Our pipes clog and rust, while the terracotta conduits beneath Rome's Pantheon still drain rainwater flawlessly after 2,000 years. The difference isn't just skill, it's philosophy. These ancient engineers didn't see themselves as conquerors of nature, but as collaborators. When they tilted the Taj Mahal's minarets, they weren't just avoiding collapse, they were letting the Earth's tremors pass through like a dancer yielding to a partner's lead. Perhaps the most humbling lesson lies in the materials themselves. At Japan's Ai's Grand Shrine, the sacred inner temple is rebuilt every 20 years using the same ancient techniques, not out of superstition, but because the cypress wood's natural oils and grain direction make it more resilient to typhoons than any modern alloy. In an age of carbon footprints and climate crisis, these structures whisper a radical truth. Sustainability isn't a new invention, but a very old memory waiting to be reclaimed. The real miracle isn't that these temples still stand, but that they still teach if we're willing to kneel close enough to hear. The legacy of these forgotten engineers lingers not in dusty scrolls or faded blueprints, but in the way sunlight still obeys their ancient designs, how whispers still twist through their corridors with unnatural clarity. Their names may have vanished, but their fingerprints remain etched into stones that align with solstices they'll never see, carved into acoustics that still hum with frequencies modern labs are just beginning to measure. What's astonishing isn't merely that their work endures, but that it evolves. Every time a physicist points a laser scanner at the Pantheon's dome or an archaeologist maps the sonic resonance of Chavin de Huanta's tunnels, we're not just uncovering secrets, we're catching up to a conversation these masters started centuries ago. Consider how their holistic vision puts modern architecture to shame. Today's skyscrapers might boast energy-efficient glass or earthquake-resistant alloys, but they rarely consider how a space feels, how light pooling on a floor might calm a racing mind, or how a subtle curve in a hallway could guide footsteps into rhythm. Meanwhile, the builders of Borobudur designed an entire mountain as a meditation manual in stone, where every turn of the labyrinth mirrors the neural pathways of contemplation. In Malta, underground temples channel winter rains into chambers that amplify chanting voices, blending hydrology, acoustics, and ritual into a single seamless system. These weren't just structures, they were ecosystems of awe where every element conspired to elevate the human experience. The deeper irony, our technology is finally advanced enough to recognize how advanced theirs truly was. When 3D printers replicate the fractal patterns of Islamic jolly screens to create self-cooling buildings, or when neuroscientists study the theta waves induced by Gothic vaults, we're not inventing, we're remembering. The Maya calculated Venus cycles with error margins smaller than NAS, our first computers. Roman concrete self-heals cracks using chemistry we've only recently decoded. These weren't primitive tricks, they were sciences of the sublime, disciplines that treated intuition and calculation as two sides of the same coin. Perhaps their most enduring lesson is about scale. In an era obsessed with megastructures, their greatest feats were often subtle, a shadow that appears only once a year, a whisper that carries farther than a shout. They understood that true power lies not in dominating the landscape, but in harmonizing with it. The Taj Mahal's leaning minarets don't fight earthquakes, they dance with them. Angkor Wat's moats don't just reflect the temple, they mirror the monsoon clouds, turning the sky into another wall of the sanctuary. This wasn't just engineering, it was poetry written in gravity and light. Now, as climate change forces us to rethink our relationship with the planet, their wisdom feels less like history and more like prophecy. The wind catchers of Persia, the passive cooling of stepwells, the solar-aligned harvest calendars etched into temple walls, these aren't relics but roadmaps. They whisper that the future of design might not lie in newer materials but in older wisdoms, that a building should breathe like a forest, that a city could tick like a celestial clock, that the divine isn't something to depict but to invoke through the very stones beneath our feet. The real illusion wasn't making heaven feel near, it was making us forget we ever thought it was far away. The forgotten engineers who shaped sacred spaces weren't just constructing buildings, they were crafting experiences that blurred the line between the earthly and the eternal. These visionaries understood something profound. Architecture isn't just about shelter, but about shaping consciousness itself. Take the way light bends through the stained glass of Chartres Cathedral, painting the floor with colors that shift like a living canvas, or how the echoing whispers in Malta's hypogeum seem to rise from the stones. These weren't accidents, they were meticulously designed moments of awe, meant to short-circuit logic and open the door to wonder. What's striking isn't just their technical prowess, but their refusal to separate science from the sacred. To them, the golden ratio wasn't just a mathematical curiosity. It was the fingerprint of the divine, a pattern woven into the fabric of existence. When they aligned temples with solstice sunrises or tuned chambers to resonate at specific frequencies, they weren't choosing between rationality and reverence. They were proving that the two could dance together, that a perfectly calculated angle could be as holy as a prayer. Today, we've compartmentalized these realms, treating spirituality and science as opposing forces. But these builders knew better. Their work whispers a radical idea that the universe speaks in numbers and the sacred hides in the spaces between equations. Their legacy forces us to reconsider what advanced really means. We might have skyscrapers and quantum computers, but could we replicate the psychological precision of Borobudur's labyrinth, where every turn guides the mind toward tranquility? Or the acoustic alchemy of Chavin de Huanta, where sound morphs into something uncanny? These weren't primitive feats, they were triumphs of a different kind of knowledge, one that married intuition with precision in ways we're only beginning to decode. Perhaps their greatest lesson lies in their purpose. They didn't build to impress or dominate, but to connect, to create portals where the mundane could brush against the miraculous. In a world obsessed with speed and scale, their work reminds us that true mastery isn't about building bigger but deeper, that a single beam of light striking at the right moment can hold more power than 1,000 floodlights. So the next time you step into an ancient sacred space, don't just look, listen. Feel how the air changes, how the light bends, how the silence hums. These are the echoes of minds who saw the world not as a problem to solve, but as a mystery to embrace. And who knows, in their stones, you might just find a piece of that vision waiting to be rediscovered. Which of their illusions speaks to you most? Drop your thoughts below. And if you've enjoyed this journey through history's hidden genius, don't forget to subscribe for more. The past still has plenty of secrets.